Welcome to the Books of Titans podcast hosted by Eric Rostad. Join him on his 15-year journey through the immortal books. He'll share what he's learning, explore profound ideas across time and cultures, and share the one thing he always hopes to remember from each immortal book.
Have you ever wanted to read through the world's great books? Maybe you've got some of them on your bookshelves. Maybe you have titles like the Aeneid or the Odyssey or Beowulf or the Arabian Nights. Maybe these books have called to you throughout your life. You just haven't gotten into them. You want to, but you're not sure where to start. And maybe you're at a point in your life where you're past school, you're past the point of being able to select classes that go through these books. You're in the working world, you have a family, and you're just wondering how would I even start getting into the great books? Well, if that's you, if you're someone who has thought about that, if you're somebody who has wanted to get into the great books, but you're just not sure where to start, this episode is for you. I wanted to put together an episode where I talked about it from the vantage point of doing it yourself. So this episode is called the DIY Great Books Approach. So I'm currently working my way through the great books, and the great books were always something I had heard of in my life, and I had been collecting them really for like 20 years, where I'd see them in the store and like, oh man, I hope to read that book someday, and I'm just going to buy it. And it was kind of an aspirational purchase, not something I was planning to read right then, but maybe just maybe in the future, there would be a point where I would be able to read that book. And I got to the point where I started hearing of others who were reading these books, and I thought, I'm just going to go ahead and do it. And so I am way out of school, like many years out of school. I've got the job, the family, all that, and it's something of a side project for me, and it's something that I've given a lot of thought to, but it's something that I'm doing on my own. And in this episode, I want to share just ways to prepare, ways to start, and then ways to continue on this path of reading through the great books. And there's a lot of ways to get help along the way. And so I hope that this episode can encourage you in those pursuits. I always had this idea that I was not smart enough for the great books. Like I needed to have studied those in college or taken courses on how to read them. And so that was actually a barrier for me for a while. So if you're in the same way, if you feel the same way or think the same way, just know that a lot of people do, but you don't have to feel that way. The great books are not meant to confuse you. And once you can get past that, I think you're opened up to this path and this ability to approach the great books and to start reading them. And so in college, if you're in a great books program, they're going to give you a list of books to read. You read that list and all that. We're going to start from scratch here in this episode and just assume that you're going to do this on your own, and we're just going to take it right from the start. And so let's get started. I'm going to assume a couple things just right off the bat. The first is that you've at least given thought to reading the great books. Maybe you've started it, maybe you're still pondering it, but you at least have some sort of an interest in it. And the second assumption is that you are just at a point in life where you cannot attend a university to do this. You can't attend endless reading groups to go through each one of these works with a group of people. And so you're going to have to do it on your own. You're going to have to do it yourself. First thing I want to say is that you are not too old. No matter what your age is, you are not too old to start reading the great books. Even if you have a month left of life, you could read the Iliad in that final month of life, or you could listen to it. If you've got 2 months left, you could read the Bible. If you've got a year, you could get through at least 12 of the great books. If you've got 5 years, maybe 50 books. What about 10 years? You could probably get through 125 of these great books, just knowing that some of them are very long, others of them are short. So on the preparation side of things, that's where I want to start. The first thing we have to look at is that time aspect. So 2 considerations here. One is, how many years do you want to pursue this? Or how many years do you have left? And let's just get that on the table. We all have a limited life. We all have a limited reading life. There are only so many books that we'll be able to read in our life. So on either of those sides of the time spectrum there, either how many years do you want to put into this project, or how many years do you likely have left in your life? Let's set that number out right away. So for me, I decided I was going to spend the next 15 years reading through the great books. At first, I thought maybe 10 years, but then as I kind of got my list together and started reading them, I realized it's going to take a little longer than I initially thought. So first, set a year, just kind of think through that in either how long you want to dedicate to this, or how many years do you have left in life, realistically. Second thing is quantity. How many books do you want to read? And on quantity, it could either be the number of books or the number of authors. So let's say you've got 5 years and you're going to do 50 books. That could be the quantity that you select within that time period. You could also look at it in terms of authors. And that's what I've decided to do with my list. So I've created a list of 200 authors. The thing that I kept getting hung up on creating a list of just books is that there are probably like 15 or 20 plays by Shakespeare that I want to read. So if I decide that I want to read 200 books, and then Shakespeare takes up a good chunk of those 200, or I want to read 50 books, but a bunch of them are Shakespeare, or Thucydides, or Euripides. I ended up reading like 18 plays by Euripides, and so I didn't want 18 to come out of that total list. So I decided instead to go by author. So I've got a list of 200 authors, and some works don't have authors, so I just leave the author blank and then have the work there. But the majority of my list is based upon authors. The third item in the preparation side of things is the composition of the works that you want to include in your list. So if you look at most lists out there, they're going to be of the Western canon. So if you just pull up a random list of the great books, most of those will be focused on the Western canon, meaning you're reading works from Europe and the United States, and so it's very heavily focused on the West. It will be ancient Greece and Rome, but you're not looking to the East. You're not looking to Asia. You're not looking to Africa. You're mainly focused on the Western canon, and you can usually tell these lists by where they start, because they'll often start with Homer. For me, I was very interested in reading works from the East. And so I made a concerted effort to find the great works that were written in places other than just the West. So the majority of the books are from the West, but I picked a lot from the East as well. I also asked around to get good recommendations and suggestions for women authors along the way who had written great books. And then for me, it was really important to read different religious texts. So I wanted to read at least one work, kind of the main work for each of the world's main religions. And so those were the parameters I set for my list. I wanted it to be outside of just the Western canon. I wanted it to include women, and I wanted it to include different areas, and then just have a strong focus on religious texts, and also for me, kind of the church fathers. So I made sure there were quite a number of church fathers in the list of 200 authors on my list. So after you decide the composition, if you just want it to be the Western canon, if you want it to be a larger canon, if you want it to kind of focus on the great books of just one area or one time period, decide on that composition as the next part of it. The fourth thing under preparation is selection. So here's where you are going to select the books or the authors that will be part of your final list. And just know that I'm in year 3 of reading through the great books, which, by the way, I call them the immortal books. I just don't think great books is a good enough term for them, so I call them the immortal books. But I'm in year 3, and I view my list as a constantly changing list. So I'm getting recommendations from people. I'm seeing what other people are reading. I know my major ones. There are some books on there that will not ever change. There are some authors on there they will not ever change. But I am opening I am open to having it at change at different points. But in that selection process, you really want to be looking at other lists out there. I go on to Twitter X all the time and just ask people. So if, for instance, I just sent in the past week, I asked people about Plato. I have Plato coming up as my next author on my list. And I just didn't know where to start. Like, which translation should I get? What version? Is there a book that has all of his works, or should I get each separately? And then for each one, which translation? And I just got a ton of response. I mean, people love to share that. So I got just a ton of responses, and I started to see the same book mentioned over and over. So I ended up purchasing that one. And so it just makes it really fun. Like you can kind of crowdsource this to get the answers of books, and people just, again, love to share that. They love to share which translation is their favorite or what version is their favorite. So you can have a really good time with that. The fifth thing you want to do on the preparation side is, once you have determined the time that you're going to put into it, the quantity of either books or authors that you're going to read, the composition of your list, and then the selection process, you want to then take the books that you have selected or the authors you have selected and put them in a particular order. The order I've selected is chronological order. I love to see how ideas expand over time and how they're first introduced in some of these works. And yes, the ideas were probably talked about for many thousands of years or hundreds of years before that. But in these works, we see these ideas presented for the first time in a written format or a tablet format or something to that effect. And to just see how that works its way through time is magical to me. So reading my list in chronological order is very important to me. And the way I determine the chronological order, especially for the oldest works, is by the year of the death of the author. They didn't go to the Barnes and Noble and do a book release. So we don't really, for a lot of these works, we don't know the exact year that they would have come out, like we do for more recent works. But most of the time we do know the year that author died. And so that's how I've based my list is the author death date until we get maybe to the 1500s or something, where we have a little better idea of when books actually came out and the year that they came out. So you could do it chronologically. You could do it random. You could just have your list and then run it through a randomizer and just read them in a random order. Or you could self-select your order. So maybe it's the ones that you really want to make sure you get through, kind of the top of the canon, and you put those first. But just kind of come up with a general order of in which you want to read those books. I want to remind you, these books are not meant to confuse you. As I said before, that was one of the biggest things for me. I can understand them. It may take a long time. It may take me reading them 4 times. It may take me reading other books or seeing what other people have thought about these works, but they're not meant to confuse you. There's some just gold and beauty in these books. So that was the preparation side of things. The next thing is just getting started. So here's some helpful ideas that I've found that have really helped me on the do-it-yourself approach to reading through the great books or the immortal books. So I've got a few things here. The first is just to select and be open to having guidebooks that help you along the way. And so again, if you're doing this by yourself, you're not going to a class each day or each week to where you're in front of a professor who is telling you everything you need to know about this book and giving you great insight into the historical, where this novel fits or this book fits and all that. You're doing this on your own. And so you want to look for guidebooks in the sense of, like, are there helpful books that talk about the book that you're reading, or are there different translations? So I oftentimes, if I have a trouble with a particular translation of a work, I will get a second translation and then really make a point to look at, okay, this first translator translated this word this way, and I had a really hard time understanding what that meant. Now, this second translator used a different word. Does that help me, or does it give a little more insight into perhaps what what that term means. There's also just different versions of a lot of these books, and they all contain a different introduction. So I've gotten a lot out of the introductions of different works because you're learning a lot of the history that went into it, maybe an introduction to the work itself. One thing I try to do with all of these, though, is if possible, I try to start with the work itself before I read the introduction. So for the Iliad, instead of reading the introduction and then going into the Iliad, I just started right into book 1 of the Iliad. And I recommend that as much as possible where you can do that. There are times where I can't do that. Like I have no idea what's going on in the work, and I just need some sort of a basis from which to work from when I finally do approach the work. But with that in mind, if these are not meant to confuse you, do at least try on the majority of the works to just start, and you'll be surprised. Like you'll understand it, and it's so fun to just approach a text for the first time and just to see what happens and not have someone else's voice in your head of how you're supposed to read it or how you're supposed to think about it, but to just approach it fresh from your own vantage point, and then perhaps go to the introduction or the version or different notes afterwards or a guidebook. But yeah, kind of look for different things that can help you for works that you have trouble on. I think back to the Rig Veda. When I read that, I started reading the Rig Veda. I was so lost. I had no idea what was going on. And so I got this other book that really helped me to understand it. So I stopped reading the Rig Veda. I went to this other book that was actually by the lady who had translated the version of the Rig Veda I was reading. I read that, and then I went back to the Rig Veda, and it helped tremendously. So when you're doing this by yourself, you're going to need tools like that just to help you to understand what's going on in some of these works. Second thing on helpful idea just for starting is to join a group. And I say there are kind of two main reasons why you would want to join a reading group with these great books. And the first would be to join a group for the most important books. So there's a thing called the Catherine Project, and they read. You can join a group; it's free. You can join a group reading through most of the great books. So they have different semesters, and you get the list of what they're doing. You sign up for it, and so I read Homer, Aeschylus, Thucydides, and other works within groups, and that was such a huge help. I read the Iliad and the Odyssey together. We'd cover 3 or 4 books a week and discuss them. That was so helpful. The thing about groups is you get kind of, it's like you're reading the book multiple times because you're hearing what all these other people in the group are thinking about the work as well. So on that side of it, either for the most important works or the works that you need the most help with, that's really where you want to seek out a group. You could even start your own group. I guarantee you'll be able to find people in your area who also want to read these works. So you just put up a notice somewhere, and just say, I'm wanting to read this book. Would you be willing to read it with me? And we'll do a chapter a week or a book, 4 books a week if it's something like the Iliad or the Odyssey, and you can just get through a work like that, and it really helps. And the third thing I would say, and just in helpful ideas on the do-it-yourself side of things, is that idea I shared in the first group on the preparation side of just go to Twitter, X, or some of the other social platforms and just ask around, like ask for help in understanding things, or if you don't understand a chapter or a word, people love to help on that kind of thing, and they love to give their thoughts on a text or something that you may be struggling on understanding. So I use that a lot. I love doing that on these social media platforms, especially Twitter, because you get answers really quickly on that kind of thing. So we've set the preparation. We have started. Now, how about continue? How do I keep this momentum going once I've started the great books? And I want to just give 4 ideas in this section here. So the first on continuing through the reading of the great books as you're doing it yourself is flexibility. You've got to be flexible in this project, in this work of going through the great works. flexibility is key. So you've got to be able to expand or contract. So there will be points where you will need more help. You'll need to read more guidebooks, or you'll need to read additional translations or versions. Just be open to that. Know that that's going to happen. Also know that there'll be times where a work is just not working for you. Maybe you had planned to read a couple different translations, or you had planned to read like the full work, but there are ways you can read an abridged version or something like that. Just kind of be open to expanding or contracting it at any point. Also be on the flexibility side, be willing to go slow or fast at different points. You may just want to slow down with a particular work or set of works and really dig deep into them, maybe read them more than once. But just be open to that. A couple examples from my side, I think it was book 3 from my list was Ancient Writings from Egypt. And it's just this one little penguin book. And I started going through that, and I just became utterly fascinated with it, with Egypt and the history. And so I started getting these other books. And here I was just planning on reading one book, and I ended up reading 7 books, and I spent a month on Egypt. And I was so glad I did that. And I look at those books, and I'm so glad I went through those. I learned a ton. I've been to the British Museum a couple times since kind of digging. And it was just a month, but like I just learned so much and enjoyed it so much. And just to see those statues and things at the British Museum, it was very cool. The other thing I did with tragedies, I had this plan. So I had a plan to just read 2 of the tragedies per playwright, 2 or 3 tragedies per playwright. And there's 3 main ones for Greek tragedy writers. And I got into them and I just fell in love. And so I decided I'm going to read all of these. There's 7 by Aeschylus, there's 7 by Sophocles, and there's 18 by Euripides. I'm just going to go ahead and read all of them. They take an hour and a half to 2 hours to read. These are so fun. I'm just going to read them all. So just be willing to have that to where you're open to going slow through something or speeding up as well. On the slow side, I also had a lot of trouble getting into the tragedies at first. So when I started with Aeschylus, I had to read the first part. I had to read it 4 times. So I read his first plays 4 times before they really clicked, and that took a long time. I've got this list of 200 authors. I've got to keep moving through this to some degree, but it's also important to just have that flexibility to slow down if need be. So the second thing on continuing through the works is to make your own canon along the way. And by this, what I mean is you're going to come across works that just blow you away. You will connect with them on such a deep level that you will want to return to them. And so make it a part of your yearly reading to reread some of these works. So each year I start my year by rereading the Bible, and it takes me 2 months. That's the only thing I read, but I start in Genesis, I end in Revelation, and I love that. It's just a great way to start the year. I've thought about kind of inserting the Iliad in there every other year as well. But those are 2 works that I want to return to often in my life. Gilgamesh, I've returned to that a few times since reading it as the first book in my Immortal Books list. But over time, kind of create your own canon, but have time set aside each year where you can return to those works, and it will be such a blessing in your reading life. And I divided my year. This is another thing, just maybe on the flexibility side of things, but keep your year open. Don't just read the great books. Have some other books mixed in there, and that's kind of my third thing for continuing through the great works. These great works a lot of them are heavy reading, so you're going to need some light reading every now and then. I divide my year. I've got the Bible for January and February, and then March through June, I read through the Immortal Books. In July, I take my summer break. So I just finished that. Now I'm back in August. August through November is the fall semester of the Immortal Books. that was August through November. Yeah. And then December is when I read that's my winter break. So that's where, again, I'm reading kind of lighter stuff, just stuff that has piled up on my to be read pile. And just that mixing it up during the year. I've got 8 months dedicated to the Immortal books. I've got 4 months dedicated to other reading. That really helps to just keep things moving and not just to get stuck in these really heavy books. The last thing I would say on the continuation side of things is to visit secondhand bookstores. And that may sound like a weird thing for keeping a reading project going, but you want to have these parts of your life that are dedicated to exploration. So that could be a library as well. But the reason I say secondhand bookstores is you want to come across works that are not just the latest translations or the latest versions of works, but you want to go into bookstores that have books that are out of print and other translations of famous works. So when I go into secondhand bookstores now, I'm making a beeline to the classics area, and I want to see what translations they have of the Iliad and the Odyssey. I want to see what other books they have about those books. So about the Iliad or the Odyssey. I'm curious as to what they have on the Greek tragedy writers. Maybe someone wrote a book about them 100 years ago, and it's just not, you would never find it on Amazon or something, but here it is in a bookstore. And just seeing those things just helps you tie a lot of what you're reading together. So as you're going through these great books, like it just opens up these bookstores to you. It opens up these libraries to where you know what works are being referred to, or you know what different works now are talking about. For example, one of the books I just read during July was a book about the library of Ashurbanipal. And he had these tablets of cuneiform. It's where we got Gilgamesh. A lot of these tablets are in the British Museum now. But that tied together so many things that I had read on the Immortal book side, but it was in this one book. And so it's just stuff like that where you go to a bookstore and you can see these books, and it excites your imagination because you've got other things to pursue. The other thing I would say on the bookstore side of thing is just buy beyond what you can read, because especially on if going through the great books, you'll find other translations or versions, or maybe books like that where it kind of ties a whole lot of history together on a topic like cuneiform or books in general or that kind of thing. Get those books. You may find time to read them maybe in the months where you're going through your to be read pile, but those books just make the whole thing so exciting because now you're tying ideas together. You're seeing how different authors have spoken about the same idea, but you've come across it on your own in reading through these great works. So make it a point to visit secondhand bookstores, libraries, that kind of thing, viewing that really from the exploration side of things. Well, let me close out here just by sharing a little bit about my path on this great books list and reading through them. At first, I kind of viewed it as a bucket list item, and when I think of bucket list items, there are some things that are going to be really fun. Maybe jumping out of an airplane is on your bucket list or something. And yeah, you might be terrified of it, but there's just like this exhilaration that's going to happen, and you're just flying through the air. Like it's going to be incredible. So that's kind of on the fun side of things, but there are also items that we have on our bucket lists that give us a deep sense of accomplishment. And so that might be running a marathon, and that is not going to be fun. There might be fun aspects of it. You might feel really good after running, or just the preparation. Maybe you're meeting people to run, and it adds another component to your life and helps you get healthy and all that kind of stuff. But the marathon itself you're going more for a sense of accomplishment. Like, I've done that. I've run a marathon, or I have done this thing. And at first, that's really how I viewed the great books. It was just something that I wanted to do. And it was kind of a bucket list item of like, I want to check that off the list before I die, that I have read through the great books. But it quickly shifted for me to where this is not just something I want to check off. This is the most fun I've ever had in my life reading. These are the best books I have ever read in my life. They are the deepest books. They are the books that give the most joy. They point to the most beauty. They tie things together. They give insights into people. They give insights into humankind. They're just incredible. And I want to share that because if you're kind of on the edge and you're like, I don't know if I want to read through the great books. I don't know if I want to just take the time it's going to take to read 10 great books or 50 or 125. But I would really encourage you to do it. If you like reading, you're going to like this even more. So I want to encourage you to keep it as an option and maybe just start dipping your toe into it. One of the things I do is I lead a short great books reading group each month. And the main reason for that is I want people to be able to dip their toes into the great books. I want them to see that they're not scary things, that they can read them, they can enjoy them, they can discuss them. And I have this notion, I have this idea that if you can just get somebody to read some of these books, it has the potential to change their life. It has the potential to get them interested in reading the great books. And so if you're at that point, just start dipping your toe in. Maybe you start with short, great books. You can view my website. You can view my reading group and the books that we have on that list this year as good places to start. And then just start doing it. Just start reading these great books. But if you want to go deeper, do what I've said in this episode, where you prepare, you get your list together, you start, you turn it into an adventure, and then you put steps in place to have it be a continual thing. It just becomes part of your life. It's just something that you are doing. You're working your way through the greatest books that have ever been written. Well, that's going to do it for this episode. I hope this has been helpful. I see so many people starting to do this now. Whether it's on social media. I was at Landmark Booksellers tonight, and there was a lady in there who purchased a number of great books, and I'm seeing this desire of people wanting to read these books. We're so inundated with the temporal and the quick and the things here and now. It's just so there's just this desire to view and to read what the ancients had to say. And this is the best place to start these great works. These are the greatest things ever written. These are the things that have impacted our culture. They're the things that have impacted other things that we read. And it's an incredible quest. So I hope you'll at least give it thought. It took me a long time to be convinced that that's something that I wanted to do. And it really started with understanding that books come from books. And there is a canon of books that kind of influenced all the others out there. And lists will vary, but you will see a number of the same books on almost all the lists. And so the fewer number of books that you decide to read, probably the easier it'll be to create that list, just because you're going to see, let's say you pick 12 books or 50 books, you're going to see the same 12 books on every single list or 50 books on every single list. And it'll be easy to decide those. Once you get into higher numbers, then you're making decisions on what's really something that you want to dig into a little deeper. If you're in this process and you have other wisdom to share on just how you've done it yourself, how you've learned, how you've picked your books, please leave those comments on Substack where others can see them, and we can just kind of get a discussion going there on ways to help us get through these great books and enjoy these great books. I'll be back next week. I'll talk about another book or another idea on the reading front. Until then, keep reading, keep listening, and keep listening. Keep reading, keep learning, and keep listening. I'm out.